What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show. We're right here on the show every single Monday. I, Graham G.S. and Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking the new Bring It to the Table Season 1, Episode 5 that aired last week after Raw on the network. So, lot to digest here. Probably the longest episode to date. 35 minutes long. I'm sure the other ones were like 20, 25, 30 at most. This one was 35. The time actually flew by. I would put it on par with the past few episodes. They're not like amazing or anything, but really coming off the first one, the pilot, the premiere a couple of months ago, back at the onset of 2017, which fucking sucked. These past couple episodes have been just great in comparison, but they're still pretty different. I mean, the whole purpose of the show is to create controversy, create conversation amongst the WWE Universe. They're not really, I mean, they are kind of shooting on their thoughts and some things that we're talking about online and writing articles about and shit like that. But really, at the end of the day, it's a WWE produced show. They're not going to bury themselves. Like, I'll talk about the Bayley thing in a second, but they talked about how Bayley was losing momentum and all this other shit. They're obviously not going to bury the company because they're not using her right. They're not going to say that. They're going to give every other excuse in the book. So we'll talk about that momentarily, but just keep that in mind while watching the show. Anyway, so the episode starts off with a quick clip from Backlash where Byron Saxton on commentary forgot Rosenberg's name, which I thought was pretty funny, and they got a kick out of it too. The first segment, the first topic they talk about is the This Is Your Life segment. I mean, I think it's best to just move on from this at this point, and so we can all forget it, or at least try to forget it, because it was that fucking bad. But they do talk about how bad it was. JBL does agree that it was absolutely atrocious. He buries it. He says, in the same conversation, he puts the Tuxedo match on Raw from years ago, the Jim Ross and Michael Cole rap battle, which I thought was... I was entertained by it, by how bad it was, but that was pretty terrible. I wouldn't put that up with the worst Raw segments of all time, but it still sucked, though. And Corey Graves brings up from WCW, they always got to take a shot at WCW. He brings up the Viagra on a pole match from Vince Russo, who he does name drop, by the way. He brings up fake Razor and fake Diesel. And then JBL, which I had no idea about, JBL brings up how he took part in this terrible match on Raw. It might have been somewhere from like 2000 to 2002. I know Jackie Gaeta was in it, Chris Nowinski, Trish Stratus, and maybe someone else. I thought it was more people, but it might have been those four. The match was atrocious, fucking terrible, from what you can see in the highlights. Again, I think they showed the date in there. I missed it. Obviously, it's on the network somewhere. It's on an episode of Raw, I believe. But it was really bad. So, again, I think that kind of gets overlooked as one of the worst Raw segments ever. It wasn't really a segment. It was more of a match. It was pretty bad. You got to see it for yourself. But JBL is not wrong in including that in the same segment, in the same breath as This Is Your Life Bayley, because that was pretty bad, too. So, speaking of which, they talk about Bayley losing momentum. What's the cause of it? Is she not the same as she once was? Corey Graves does agree that she is not the same Bayley that we saw in NXT. Now, again... she's like, oh, she was on the top of the world at WrestleMania when she retained her Raw Women's Championship, whatever. Like, they're kind of citing storyline reasons that she lost her footing. She kind of lost a step along the way in dropping the title, coming up short at Extreme Rules, all this other shit. When in reality, it's the company not booking her character properly. And say what you will about her mic skills, and they've never been amazing, but at the same time, the way they've handled this woman has single-handedly ruined her. I mean, they've buried her. And I don't want to say ruined because there is a chance she can bounce back. And it was weird because I'll talk about it in a second, but JBL goes on this weird tirade here in saying that This Is Your Life thing has no bearing on either Bliss or Bayley. Which is true, because he did use that match as an example I just talked about with him and Trish and Gaeta and Nowinski, that just because they were involved in one of the worst Raw matches of all time did not mean that they were doomed forever. It doesn't help, obviously, but it doesn't mean that your career is over, which I do agree with. I mean, obviously, Alexa Bliss is going to be just fine. It's more so Bayley, who has been completely buried as of late on Raw. A term I do not use loosely, but she has been buried on Raw since she showed up back in August, when I was there for her debut, and it's been all downhill since then. But anyway. But then he says that there's a chance of her not making it. Which, I mean, of course, there's a chance of anyone not making it, but he says it in a way where he believes where Bayley might not work on the main roster, which is such bullshit, because the character has all the tools to succeed. It's the easiest character to book. from a family-friendly storyline, from a family-friendly standpoint, which the audience is nowadays, and being PG and whatnot, she should be the easiest character to book and get over with this audience, with this current fan base. But they're just fucking her up at every opportunity and having her lose, look like a loser, all this other shit. It's ridiculous. So the fact that he says there's a chance of her not making it, I thought was dumb, but he is right in saying that this is your life thing is not going to break her career. It did in the moment. It was pretty terrible, obviously, but it does not mean that Bayley is done for. If they continue booking her the way they have been, then she'll be done for. But so far, she's not yet damaged goods. They talk about, speaking of the women, the women's Money in the Bank ladder match that took place last night, as you're listening to this on WWE Network and Show. They talked about the women's Money in the Bank ladder match and how Corey Graves has high expectations following the women's Hell in a Cell match on Raw from Charlotte and Sasha, how they kind of really set a precedent for the women going forward in WWE. JBL says the women can watch some tape, the Hardy Boys, all that other stuff. They move on to Samoa Joe versus Brock Lesnar, coming out of Extreme Rules, going into Great Balls of Fire. JBL says that Samoa Joe deserves the opportunity, which I agree with. Corey Graves says he cannot wait to commentate it. He said way back when, a couple months back, that if there was any one match he wanted to call, it was Samoa Joe and Brock Lesnar, which I think Corey Graves calling it's going to be great, but it'd be cool if we had Jim Ross on the table too. Very unlikely. I know they bring in JR for like takeover stuff and big matches like Reigns and Taker or the UK matches and shit, but him calling Joe and Lesnar, at least that match, if not the entire show, would be pretty damn cool. Rosenberg says he saw Samoa Joe backstage at WrestleMania 33 and said that, he talked about how Samoa Joe wasn't on the card and asked him if that bothered him. And Joe said, yeah, but he knows his opportunity will come. He knows he's in the right direction. He'd been pushed pretty heavily on Raw. Heading into the pay-per-view, he did not make a single appearance in the entire show, which was pretty shocking, but he knew if he waited it out, he would get his opportunity. Now he is, which is pretty cool. And then Rosenberg alludes to the fact that the graphic for Great Balls of Fire, as we all say, he doesn't, again, alludes to it, he doesn't outright say it, but he does allude to the fact that the graphic, or the previous graphic for the pay-per-view, looked like dick and balls, which was ridiculous, which was so ironic / funny / it cannot be a coincidence. I don't know who that would have been passed, who that would have gotten past, but it did, for a pay-per-view called Great Balls of Fire, which was pretty great, but they move on quickly from that. They talk about what has been so far the match of the year. Rosenberg's pick is Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman from Payback. Not a bad choice, which was a great match. I think other people would say the Fastlane match was better, but I did enjoy the Payback match a lot, if only for the booking of Strowman going over. But the match itself was pretty great too, obviously. Corey Graves says, which would be my pick personally, Tyler Bate and Pete Dunne from TakeOver Chicago, which I would say so far is the WWE match of the year. That was just absolutely amazing. And then JBL says AJ Styles versus John Cena from the Rumble for the WWE Championship. Another great match. I don't know if it's the best main roster match, but in my opinion, it might be. I thought those two really killed it at the Rumble, and they obviously have amazing chemistry together, but Cena and Styles 5 years ago, let alone last year, or 2 years ago even happening would have been a dream match. I mean, it was a year ago today we got Cena and Styles for the first time at Money in the Bank, and Styles won that. So with the fact that we're talking about this match a year later, not that match, but the series of matches they had a year later is pretty impressive in and of itself, obviously. They move on from there to talk about... Now, JBL does say when he's discussing Styles and Cena, and this kind of goes into the next topic here, that Styles and Cena did not need to do all these dives and did not even need to go out to the floor to have this great match. And that you don't need to do dives to have a good match. It was a great wrestling match, he said. And that transitions into the Orton rant on Twitter from about a month ago, with them talking about dives and all this other shit. So JBL, which you could say whatever you want about him, and he had a lot of good points on this episode. This one I do not agree with. Neither did Corey Graves or Peter Rosenberg, for that matter. But JBL says they do dives because they don't know how to work. He says they're silly, stupid dives, and they're doing it to get a reaction. Which I could not agree more, or could not disagree more with, And neither could Corey Graves. I'll talk about that in a second, too, in his rebuttal. But just because people do dives doesn't mean they don't know how to wrestle. I mean, even Corey Graves mentioned the Ricochet and Will Ospreay match, Just because you're doing dives doesn't mean they don't know how to wrestle. These guys are two of the best in the world right now. So again, for some people, I agree with that. I can see what he's saying. And unnecessary dives are fucking ridiculous. I agree that we get the same dives every single week. The Usos do in every single match. Ziggler always does the super kick. We get the same moves in every single fucking match from literally everyone on the roster. So I agree with that. But to go so far as to say that the people who do dives because they don't know how to wrestle is a bit far-fetched. And then Corey Graves says there's people who could do both, which I agree with. And he says, which I also agree with completely. And they've talked about the Cruiserweight division in 205 Live a million fucking times in the show. And Corey Graves hits it right on the nail right on the head with this comment here. He says, 205 Live would be the best show on television if they could do what they were able to do, if they were allowed to do what they're capable of. Which, again, is so true. 205 Live right now feels like a third hour of Raw. It feels like an extra hour of Raw because it's no different than Raw. They have good matches, but the crowds don't care. And it's not the same wrestling we saw in the CWC. We know they're capable of so much more. It's not their fault. It's the company's fault for not letting them go out there and have the matches they're able to, that they're capable of having. So he's right. And then, like I said, he mentioned Ospreay and Ricochet. They deserve to be recognized for what they could do, what they're able to do, and the business has evolved. It's a situational thing. He mentions Roman Reigns and The Undertaker, how they do dives. Does that mean they can't work? Absolutely not. It's all a matter of the situation. Again, they're not doing dives in every single match, which is good. They should not be doing them in every match. And every once in a while, you can have a cool spot fest. But he's right. There are people who could do both, like Taker. Not the best dives, but he could do dives, and he could still work. So I think that's kind of an invalid argument from JBL, who goes on to say that they're compensating for the fact they can't work and that it's hurting the business, all this other shit, pretty much repeating what he said earlier, which still makes no sense. Again, I could see where he's coming from in some respect, in that maybe some people are compensating for the fact they can't wrestle, so they're doing dives. Again, that's a very small minority there. That's not the majority, so agree to disagree, I believe, with JBL, I guess, in that respect. They talk about Lana and her debut and how she didn't really earn a title shot, all this other stuff. Corey Graves, again, might be speaking kayfabe here, but he said there was some controversy backstage among the women that Lana was getting a title shot when she did nothing to deserve it, and then the other women are going to be in the ladder match, so it makes no sense. But he does say, he references Eva Marie, how she sucks in the ring. They kind of bring up the fact that Lana is probably not so good, and it could be a car wreck of a match, it could be a train wreck of a match. But Corey does say that Eva Marie could not wrestle a lick either, but her character was so over because it was so fun to boo her. Now, where that push would have gone, we'll never really know, because she's probably gone at this point from the company, or on her way out anyway. But he's looking forward to the match to see how it plays out, see how the crowd reacts. JBL does say they were chanting, "We want Lana" at the end of that segment last week, which is true, but I don't think that's going to last. That's just my personal opinion. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong. JBL says the same thing. He wants them to succeed, and if they do, they're gonna prove people wrong. But if the match sucks, then they can enjoy calling a car wreck at Money in the Bank. So it goes both ways, I guess. Miscellaneous topics here. They bring up a hockey team. I don't follow hockey, so I have no idea. Using Bobby Roode's theme song, which I've heard about from Eric Young and Bobby Roode themselves on Twitter. They talk about someone watching Extreme Rules on their laptop at the basketball game. Someone who works, I don't know, an official or something. I saw that on Twitter the night of Extreme Rules too. Adam Jones, I think his name was, showed up at Extreme Rules. They talk about that very quickly. They show a quick video from Orton's Instagram page of Orton RKOing, not his son, but like his stepson, his wife's son, whatever, in a pool, which was pretty cool. And they talk about John Cena coming back on the 4th of July. Close out the show, they talk about they show reactions to Jinder Mahal winning the WWE Championship. They just took videos literally from YouTube. That was kind of that was weird. Not something you normally see on WWE TV, but they do show like Grimm's Tory Show and a few other YouTubers I've seen online and their reactions to the big title win. And they talk about, to close that out again, they talk about how, does the title make the superstar, or does the superstar make the title? And obviously, ideally, it should be the superstar making the title. And The Miz is the perfect example of that, in my opinion. I mean, not to say the title has never been prestigious, but it hasn't been in a long time. And I think, personally, The Miz has done more for that championship than anyone else in the past at least 5 to 6 years, since at least Cody Rhodes. And Corey Graves does bring that up. He does praise The Miz. JBL says that Mahal looks like a world champion. He doesn't really say anything about the reign itself. It's only been a few weeks, which is true. But, you just got to give it time. Again, I'm not really sold on Mahal winning the championship. He does say it was a jump start for Mahal, a lot like his WWE title win was a jump start for his own singles career back in 2004. But again, JBL could thrive as a top guy. He wasn't the greatest wrestler in the world, but as a character, he could thrive. Jinder Mahal, to me, feels very one-dimensional. And JBL had more to his character than that. So again, personal opinion, apples to oranges, whatever, but that's what JBL said. Corey Graves is kind of in the same boat. He says the superstar legitimizes each championship. He talked about The Miz, like I said. Mahal, kind of. He wasn't really sold, but he's kind of warming up to him, which I feel like is the case with a lot of people. And then he says Brock Lesnar has legitimized the Universal Championship, despite the fact he's never around. Now, I know Brock Lesnar is a legit athlete. He's a legit badass. I get that. And now we're getting our most anticipated match over the title in some time. Besides Brock and Goldberg at WrestleMania, Lesnar and Joe at Great Balls of Fire is going to be lit. No pun intended. But he says the title bounced around a bit. It was a game of hot potato after Balor got hurt and Owens had it and then Goldberg. Dude, fucking Owens had it for like 8 months. What are you talking about, a game of hot potato? The guy was the champion for like 6 to 7 months. He said it like he's been champion for like a month, and then he dropped it to Goldberg. I know Owens' reign was not great, but at least the guy was on TV every week. Brock has not been here in 2 months. It's not really Brock's fault. They just got to book him for more shows, even if it's a one-off, even if they're fucking filming him hunting or something, or sitting on his couch eating Cheetos, watching whatever, watching Hunting or Raw or whatever. And he definitely doesn't watch Raw, but you know what I mean. Just show us a video of Brock at his home. Like, if you really want to make this out to be a legitimate thing, it's okay if he's champion, but they gotta show him, acknowledge him, like acknowledge his presence every once in a while. But anyway, so to close off the episode, quick picture that Rosenberg throws up there of JBL riding on a scooter with Bruce Pritchard. So a fun little visual to close out the show. And that is Bring It to the Table, Season 1, Episode 5. Overall, good show. Like I said, a lot of conversation. The fact I've gone this long talking about it means they created conversation, created controversy. Maybe not controversy, but definitely conversation amongst fans. Especially with the Orton dive stuff. That is probably going to be the biggest talking point coming out of the show. And the Mahal thing at the end, the title thing. And that's about it. This is your life thing, the Bayley thing too. So there's a lot of good topics. Their thoughts are not as, they don't feel as forced as they usually do. So that's good. But it was a good show. I don't know if it was the best one yet. I got to watch back. I forgot about the other ones, honestly. The other ones weren't so bad. The first one sucked. The last couple of ones have been decent to good. This one I thought was very good. So check it out. It's not like must-see, but definitely check it out when you can. If you have 35 minutes to spare on the WWE Network. And that does it, guys. My review of Bring It to the Table, Season 1, Episode 5. Oh, and I forgot to mention this, too. I didn't write it down here because I watched it earlier. They did include footage of the exclusive interview with the Hardy Boys with Corey Graves that took place like before an episode of Raw or something. And it was great. The highlights were included in this episode. You could check out the full thing for yourself. I was contemplating doing another WWE Network show for it, but then I'm thinking, oh, wait, they just showed the highlights here. It'd be kind of repetitive. It was good. They talked about Hardy Boys, the Hardys, what brought them back to WWE, why they wanted to come back, who they wanted to face. Obviously, they talk about the big talking point coming out of it was whether they would use the broken characters. They do say broken. They really go so far as to say, like, delete, 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 without saying delete, delete, delete. They make a joke about Brother Nero. They talk about the legal dispute. They don't outright say Impact Wrestling or Anthem or whatever, but they get pretty, a lot more descriptive than you thought they would, than you think they would. So that was pretty cool, but a very wonderful sit-down interview with Matt and Jeff Hardy and Corey Graves. So check that out. The highlights are included in this episode, but I would recommend checking out the full thing for yourself. It's about 14 minutes long on the WWE Network under Original Specials. And that does it, guys. Thank you, as always, for checking out the show. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for daily content. We'll be back next Monday with another all-new episode of WWE Network and Chill. I think tonight is a new Table for 3 after Raw with Kelly, Maurice, and Eve Torres, who is a lot better than Eva Marie. So I'll talk about that probably next week on WWE Network and Chill. But until then, guys, have an awesome week, awesome weekend. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.